All right. Hello. Welcome to a special live streaming edition of the School Safety Pre-Period Podcast. I'm Amanda Klinger.
And I'm Dr. Amy Klinger.
And we're with the Educator School Safety Network. We provide school safety training and resources and technical assistance to schools throughout the United States and Canada. This podcast, the School Safety Free Period Podcast, is a little bit less academic, a little bit less formal. And we typically talk about things from the news that are too absurd to be true, but they actually are true. However,
I think this is a particular
super special
episode. We want to personalize this and make it personal, which sounds kind of threatening. We're going to make it personal. But I think it's interesting to talk a little bit about some of the things that are told to us as we go about and do this work, because they really, number one, they're funny, but also number two, they're very indicative of how people respond to the work of school safety and the way that sometimes people have really good intentions and then it sort of doesn't necessarily go that way. So
yeah, I think
we'll talk about a couple of those.
I think almost all of the really, really absurd things that people ask us about or questions that we get commonly almost always come from a place that's really well-intentioned. And so I guess maybe I'll start off with one. We did a training at a school district. We did a half day of training. We were talking about lockdown enhancements and options for active shooter response. And we talked, when we do training about active shooter response for schools, we talk about what we know from past events, and we talk about the best recommendations from DHS and FEMA and Department of Education, Run, Hide, Fight. And we sort of go through that and talk about it. And sometimes when we have time permitting, we'll actually do hands-on practice. So we'll take teachers into different classrooms, different types of classrooms, and we'll talk about what are the concerns here? What about this room would make it easy to rapidly evacuate if that were the case? What would make it difficult? What are the conditions under which you would feel comfortable that that's something you could do? So we did this school, we did sort of the content part, and we did the hands-on practice part. And then we brought everybody back together to do a debrief and talk about what they learned and what they thought and what were their questions moving forward and some next steps. And we had, can I say it was the librarian?
Well,
I guess I just did. The librarian.
You're not going to show it on a map or say her name.
So. At the end, the librarian came up to me and said that she wanted me to go back with her to the library because she wanted to show me her plan, which was she was going to, if there was an active shooter while the kids were in the library, she's going to pull them.
Wait, you need to point out this was an elementary school.
I think it was a middle school. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't make much difference.
I think it was an intermediate school of upper elementary kids.
So her plan is she's going to pull all the kids into this workroom in the library. I'm like, okay, so I mean that would be a good way to shelter if we were gonna barricade. We were gonna do that. It wasn't safe to evacuate. Okay, well that's not the end of the plan. We're gonna come into this room and then I'm gonna boost the kids up into the false ceiling, and the kids are gonna crawl around. And she was in the process, I think, of mapping how she would have the kids
through the false ceiling.
Through the false
ceiling.
You've
ever seen the episode of The Office where they get up in the false ceiling?
I just keep thinking of like Mission Impossible, that the kids are going to, come down through the false ceiling. So I had to sort of respectfully go, I really just don't think that we need to be boosting the kids up into the false ceiling. And again, it's incredibly well-intentioned. She was thinking of, okay, well, if we had to evacuate and we couldn't evacuate, I don't know, on our feet, that we would be evacuating up in the false ceiling. And I think this kind of dovetails with the question that we get a lot about those fire ladders. Should we get those ladders, those rope ladders that we can evacuate out the second story?
And every child in America goes, yes, we should. That would be super fun.
Well, and I try not to be an obnoxious attorney, but when you have provided fire ladders, you are saying this is an option that we as the school officially think you should avail yourself of. And can you survive a fall from a second story window if the other alternative is to be shot to death in your classroom? Then yes, we should go out a second story window in that worst case scenario. If we have a fire ladder, that becomes like an evacuation option for much lower levels of concern or danger. So it's the same thing. Going up into the false ceiling, going out the fire. We hear a lot of discussion of we're going to evacuate the kids across the flat roof, that we're going to be running on the roof.
On the ledge, too. Ledges.
Yeah, like, that we're Jason Bourne, climbing the facade of the building.
If you get busy on that parkour with the kids.
Well, I mean, they are teaching
where's the PE people?
They're teaching parkour and PE. I know that it happens sometimes. Yeah. So I think, again, sorry, we're not, we are making fun of this person, but obviously very well intentioned, but we have to sort of look at
but what was good about it is that individual started out the day saying, I'm not doing anything. I'm not dealing with this. This is not what I went into education for.
And then by
the end of the day,
they were a superhero. They were in a Spider-Man up the side of the building. Yeah. So,
well, I'm going to choose for mine to do a little bit of a retro back to the days. One time when we were I don't know how many years ago that was, when we were in Atlanta, when they had the inch of snow
that paralyzed all of Atlanta. That was,
and
years ago.
Ended up with the lot of kids stuck at school, and
like overnight.
Overnight, and people stuck in which the reason I'm saying this is literally every educator's nightmare of. I do not want to
locked in this building with these kids.
And most of you are probably too young listening to this podcast, but there was a point, maybe I don't know how many years ago, where it was very fashionable to have lock-ins, where you would bring the kids in, and funny now we don't really use that, where you would have the kids spend the night in the school, and it would be for some charity or some sort of team building activity or whatever. And we would have a lock-in where everyone is in the school. And I can remember.
How does that raise money for charity?
Well, I don't remember if it was
kids in here, give me money. Is it like a
charity?
Ransom?
But no,
it was like a ransom situation.
No, it was kind of like a thing where you were, doing, trying to raise awareness about something, or you want to do team building. And so you did this lock-in where all the kids stayed in where the kids all stayed in the school. And I can remember very clearly as a not that young teacher going, I am not spending the night in this building with all those kids. That's not happening.
Can I lock them in one room and I'll be in a different room? And
but
that's probably not
my point in this whole thing. My point in this whole discussion is it really does raise the point of, we think that would never happen, but thinking about a situation such as what, that they have had in several different areas of the country where it's not safe to move the kids home, to take the kids home. And then you're really stuck in that conundrum of, I got to go. I'm a teacher, and my kids need to be picked up, and I got to go. And, but yet someone has to stay. And what are we going to do?
So to back up. So what you were talking about in Atlanta, that they were unable to go home. The kids couldn't go home. They couldn't get the buses
out. And they had a great deal of
leave.
Difficulty having enough teachers there because, you can't. And we're in California, I believe as a state employee, you're required they can require you to do that. And so I guess my point is, as we're, looking at all the weather and, all these snowstorms, et cetera, is it's really important for us as a school to really have had some conversations about that. What would we do? And, and I understand no one wants to even remotely think of the idea of being snowbound with 700 kids in the school. I get that. No one wants that. But it really is an important piece that hasn't necessarily always been discussed. And so that really kind of leads us to something we don't always talk about, which is family emergency plans.
I was going to say that.
And that's the notion of, do you have a plan? And you can go to emergency.ready.gov to download a family emergency plan. Do you have a plan as an adult, as an educator, so that you are not torn between your responsibilities to your students and your responsibilities as an educator and your responsibilities as a parent of where's my kid? Is my personal kid? Is my kid safe? Are they being picked up? I can't stay. I have to stay. And so I think it's really important for schools to have discussions about that long before we're all standing there going, who's staying with the kids? And everyone's going, not me, not me, not me.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to have those discussions. And I have worked in schools over the years where people that didn't have children sort of stepped up and said, yep, I will do this. But you need to have that discussion before it's snowing and the emotions are running high and everybody's going, oh no, this isn't going to go well.
And you're also looking at it through the lens of choice. I mean, some of the stuff in Atlanta, they did not have a choice to go home. It wasn't, I'd like to go home and get, I don't have to run home and get my kids because I have a family emergency plan. Well, that's great. Sometimes you might not have the option to leave. If you're in, in a community-wide event and the infrastructure's down, then you need to have a family emergency plan of what happens if I physically cannot leave the school to get my own kids. So, I mean, that's, the purpose of the family emergency
plan. Just think of the ramifications of that. You're having like leftover chicken nuggets, you're having like this the milk that maybe there's only a little bit of chocolate milk left. Everybody has to take a sip. I mean, just think there's a whole bunch of.
It's not like Robinson Crusoe. You're not going to be there for 8 weeks with the kids. It's like overnight.
I'm just saying. And the room is all dirty and you haven't had a chance to clean up and there's leftover sandwiches laying around. There's just a lot that could be unpleasant about that. So I would suggest
having a family emergency plan. And just, I would suggest stockpiling food in your classroom. I mean, what are you suggesting? I'll ask.
I'm just saying, I think that it's important to have that discussion because that would have the potential to be unpleasant. Not to mention the crying and the kids and I want to leave and the parents that don't come get them or do come get them or worse yet, the parents that get stuck there with you and then you're staying there with the kids and the parents. And I don't know. There's just a lot of you, I'm sure, could respond. She's looking at me like, oh, teachers don't feel that way. Yeah, we do.
I mean, I couldn't handle it as a K-12 educator. I have no illusions of that. I mean, so, hey, okay, cool.
Okay.
I have one more. I have a last one. We talk about this sometimes in School Safety Free Period podcast, where you see in the media where a school said, we're going to have everybody bring canned goods and we're going to throw canned goods
at the hockey pucks last week.
Oh my gosh, the hockey pucks. We're going to throw hockey pucks at a shooter.
That was the hockey pucks, the miniature baseball bats. There is always a sports theme to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've also seen soup cans. And rocks.
There's a lot of very common ones, but I heard a new one.
Textbooks, maybe. Well, I don't know.
I think you might be stockpiling textbooks for other reasons. That one makes the most sense to me of any of them. But anyway, I heard a new one, which was I spoke with someone who in their field experiences, their cooperating teacher showed them the cabinets of goodies that they're going to use in the event of an active shooter, which I think had rocks or canned goods or sort of your standard one. But they had a new one, which is oil. They had a big old jug of oil that they were going to
cooking oil?
Yeah,
oil?
No, I think cooking oil that they were going to use.
So then if you're stuck, you can cook my last nightmare.
Start cooking.
You can at least deep fry the leftover chicken nuggets to bring them back.
Yeah. Actually, they were intending to use the cooking oil to spread it on the floor to make the active shooter slip and fall.
Like in Home Alone?
I said like in Mario Kart, but yes. Also, like in Home Alone, they were Kevin McAllister.
So now there's another use for those math manipulatives. You scatter them across the floor so that you can't walk on them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using the Home Alone methodology of defending your classroom, I mean, if you're in a science classroom, you get a lot of things at your disposal. So again, this person's probably pretty.
And now would be a good time to say it is not funny. I mean, and we're not making fun of people's sincere desire to protect their kids.
Sure.
And we're certainly not making light of the horrific notion that we do have active shooters in school. True. But I do think that we have to acknowledge sometimes that we're sort of turning teachers loose and sort of saying, figure out a way to do whatever, instead of providing them with appropriate training and guidance and support to be able to do that. So the sentiment is always very genuine and correct. It's just sometimes the methodology, it falls down. And that's true, of not just active shooter response. I can remember tornado drills where we end up with this, we're all trying to, sorry, I have to step over you because my spot. In a real tornado, we're not going to care that much about that. And it kind of speaks to the one we went to a school once where they had a fire drill procedure that was, I think, 14 steps because I don't know. I mean, seems like it would be, as you always point out, pretty short. Fire, get out.
Don't burn to death. That's really kind of the fire, procedure.
But what they in this particular procedure, they were saying, if the fire alarm goes off between classes, and this was a middle school, you need to report to your next period class, check in with the teacher. I assume you have to step through the flames, or maybe not.
Excuse me, smoke inhalation. I gotta get to my next period class to check in.
Over your face so that you can go to your next period class, check in, and then evacuate the building. Now, clearly, this was written, number one, for the convenience of the adults because they wanted to be able to account, which accounting for kids, great idea. But again, surviving the event, first priority. And it was also written with the idea that we're never going to have a fire. It's just
only gonna be for a
always going to
drill.
be this fire drill.
Yeah.
And so we look at this and you go, really? You expect kids to go, well, I'd love to
Just walk right out here to safety and fresh air,
but I got to go down the hall, upstairs, over there, through the flames. I'll have to crawl down beyond the smoke so that I can check in with the teacher who's standing there with apparently a smoke, a gas mask, able to take
who
attendance.
would also like to go out to safety and fresh air, but can't because they have to take attendance of.
And so that just kind of typifies. Sometimes we have good intentions, but the implementation is just gets to be a bit ridiculous.
Yeah. So there you have it, a special episode. I think next week we'll get back to things that are from the news that are too absurd to be true, but they're true.
I'm sure there won't be any
they won't
absurd
happen.
things.
So if you are just finding us for the first time, you can always subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher. You can also find the podcast directly on our website. If you're looking for other videos, you might find them here on our YouTube channel. If you're watching this live on there, if you're heading to our website, it's www.eschoolsafety.org, and you can see all of the other resources and information that we have available there. And then we always ask folks to reach out to us. Do you have a story that is too absurd to be true? Somebody who is probably really well-intentioned and maybe missed the mark in maybe what we're trying to accomplish? You can always reach out to us on Twitter or Facebook, or you can email us info@eschoolsafety.org. So anything else?
See you next time.
All right.